Hi, good afternoon, Mike. How are you in these days?
I'm fine, Elizabeth. How are you?
I'm fine. I heard that your dog doesn't want to walk anymore. He walks so long with you every day. This is true.
About 9 miles a day we have to walk.
I know it's hard. So today I'm thinking about all these COVID things, and unfortunately, from my side, I cannot talk so much about it because I don't want to say things that I don't know, right? So I'm wondering to call you to talk something that you can really talk about because we discuss and it's a kind of issues that we really are concerned about. And we are discussing a lot about the problems in the breast, the myopathies that we saw in poultry. And we have been long ago talking about the relationship about gut health and these myopathies. So today I would like to take a little bit of your time and talk your vision about that and how can we address these issues from the gut health.
Okay. Well, let's start off with realizing that when we talk about gut health, we're just not talking about the intestine, that the gut is literally the central organ for the body, that it regulates and controls the physiology of the animal, the microbiome, the microbiota, the host response to the microbiota send off signals that can regulate the physiology everywhere. And the muscle is part of that physiology. And we found a number of years ago, when Ryan Arsenault was postdoc in the lab, we did an experiment because the breeders were talking to us about the amount of fat that was being found in breast muscle. And we did an experiment with salmonella. And since we had these birds, we took some breast muscle from these birds. And this was a very subclinical infection, very few bugs. And we looked at the metabolism of the muscle. At the same time, we were also looking at the metabolism of the gut during the salmonella infection. And what we found was amazing is that a bug that is not supposed to be doing anything to the chicken was actually altering the physiology of the breast muscle, increasing fatty acid metabolism, which would account for the deposition of fat in the muscle. And we don't know why, but at the same time, in the gut, the metabolism of the gut was also altering, where fat was being metabolized and protein synthesis was being shut off. This was with a very, very light infection. And we did not believe it was specific for salmonella. We thought it was really had to do with the altering of the microbiota, that salmonella infection of the gut changed the microbiota, which then would change the physiology locally as well as systemically. We haven't done a great deal more about that, but the literature suggests strongly that dysbiosis may be playing a role, but I firmly believe right now that it is the alteration of the metabolites that the bugs, the microbiota are producing. It's not that there's so many members of the microbiota that are changing and altering their numbers, and it's the function, how they function as a population together, thus producing metabolites, which then have control systemically. And I think that is where woody breast falls into, is that we're having some sort of metabolite alteration that is affecting the muscle.
So you were saying that the alteration of microbiota that the salmonella, in this case, did, produce some metabolites or make this dysbiosis or this alterated microbiota produce a metabolite that affect and could affect the metabolism of the breast muscle.
Exactly. Right? Exactly. So, is that the change, whatever change, it's a change in probably the population of something we probably can't even measure yet with the technology that we have, that there's just a slight change in the bugs that are in the microbiota, but make a big change in the metabolites that they produce. And thus that's going to change systemically the metabolism. And there's no doubt, there's enough in the literature now that says that there is a connection between the muscle and the gut, and they're calling it the gut-muscle axis. Just like there's the gut-brain axis, the gut-lung axis. The gut talks to all the organs and tissues in the body.
And when you think, for example, in a broiler, the breast is 20% of the body, so it's really very important in terms of metabolism, right? And
exactly.
And did you do any studies specifically related it with wood breast after this first trial that you did, this first perceptions? Did you develop any other study that have been published or something like that?
Not specifically looking at woody breast. We certainly looked at the altered metabolism that occurs in the gut under various conditions with infection as well as with dietary changes. We know we can change and can measure the host metabolism at the gut level with whatever we add to it, but we've never really looked anymore at the muscle per se.
So do you think, for example, that because you take out the antibiotic or you reduce the use of growth promoters, or even the countries, there is a lot of people from countries that still use growth promoters, but we know that maybe some resistance make them don't work the way we expected. So do you think that this issue is related to increase in wood breast or in this breast myopathy, or what's your opinion about that?
I think there's reason to believe that removing the antibiotic growth promoters definitely affects the microenvironment of the gut. How that occurs, what's occurring, we don't know yet. But it's certainly playing a role in the metabolite production by the gut, which is going to affect everything. And it's not hard to believe that those metabolites either aren't getting to the gut, aren't leaving the gut, getting to the muscle, or are not allowing the beneficial bugs to grow. I mean, there's a lot of things we still have to look at there, but we don't have that handle on. The other thing we have to think about in terms of woody breast and the gut is that genetically, we've got birds that are high producers. They eat like crazy to produce meat. We are now taking those birds that are genetically programmed to go to market 4 to 5 weeks. But we want more breast muscle. We need more breast. So we're keeping them around for 7, 8, 9 weeks. The one thing we know about a broiler, just like we know with humans, a broiler is obese. It's an obese animal. It eats more than it needs, and it continues to eat more than it needs. And that's by ad libitum feedum, these animals have nutrient excess, which is inducing inflammation in the gut. The innate system, the innate immune system, can recognize excess nutrients, which is inducing what's called meta-inflammation in the gut, which is also going to play a role.
You are saying that we are overfeeding these animals, and this is could per se cause a inflammation process in the intestine.
Yeah, it definitely does that. There's no doubt about it. That is, remember, in humans, obesity is an inflammatory response. It's a disease that too much food, too many nutrients are there in the gut. It's inducing inflammation, which is then having systemic effects, type 3, like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, et cetera, et cetera. It's not hard to believe that's going on in the bird as well, that you're inducing a meta-inflammation, a low grade, but chronic inflammatory response in the gut, which is going to affect the microbiota, which is going to induce metabolic changes at the gut level, metabolites, the whole thing. So it's a vicious cycle. Now, what I'm not advocating is that we put birds on feed restriction. I think what we need to think about is, and I'm not a nutritionist, is are we getting the correct nutrients to where they need to be? These animals we know how much protein, we know how much carbohydrate, we know how much minerals, an animal needs, but we give more than it needs because it's not getting to where it needs to go, just to make sure that the animals are getting their requirements. So yes, there's an excess of nutrients at the gut level.
So when you think about a future, like especially in these times that we are in quarantine, so we start to think a lot, right? You think maybe we can improve the way we are doing the things personally and also as a producers. We like here in Jeff, we talk a lot about precision nutrition is something that Jean always talk about precision nutrition. So if you think about how to be more efficient in the way you are saying, maybe you need to really review the amount of feed that we are giving to the animals, because you know, I'm not nutritionist. I know the nutritionists become a little scared. They are online right now.
Right.
You can send people that are online. They also can send questions for us, and then we can discuss. If not now, later on, right? So the nutritionist. I'm not nutritionist, but maybe. By selections, we know that one of the genes of selections, it was to increase the feed intake, right? Because increase the feed intake, increase the weight gain, that is something that we expected, and better feed conversion. So I'm wondering here if the future is to work nutritionists and us, right? The professional in the poultry area, to try to find a way to reduce the feed intake, but at the same time to be more effective, right? This is something that you are saying?
Yes, absolutely. Is there a way of making sure that the nutrients that the animal's intaking is actually getting to the part of the gut where it's going to be absorbed correctly at the levels that you want it to, so that you're not giving in, you know, we've talked about this in the past, minerals. We give how many more minerals than the animal actually needs just to make sure it gets the amount of minerals that it does need. Well, that'd be the same for everything. Is there a way of somehow making sure that the nutrients in the diet are actually getting to the part of the gut where they're absorbed and not just going down to other parts of the gut where there's pass through? The other thing that you brought up that really is really, really interesting for the future is that because of the connection between the gut and the brain, we can control behavior, which means that we have the ability to control appetite and how much and feed intake in an animal simply by manipulating the microbiota. So is that something that on the other side of the coin, instead of playing with nutrients, can we play with the microbiota to change it so that it's producing metabolites that go to the brain through the enteric nervous system and through hormones, reach the brain, so the animal actually feels like it's not hungry anymore. It's eaten enough, and it's only eaten a fraction of what it is. So that's another side of the coin that we possibly can get to control that sort of thing, that we don't have nutrient excess.
So I'm listening to you, and I'm seeing that you are not talking about a kind of microorganism, because always when you talk about microbiota, Mike, people are saying, oh, I increase lactobacillus, I reduce these. And in your conversation here, I just listened to you talk about metabolites and not really about a specific microorganism. So do you believe that study the metabolites or the results of metabolites that are producing in the gut are more important than the microorganisms per se?
I think that we do not need to know the individual bugs that are within any population of the gut. I think we need to know the population of an area of the gut and how it functions. And that function is metabolites. So yes, we don't need to know and try to identify every bug that's there. We just need to know how that population functions. I've shown a slide, you know the slide I'm talking about, where in a human system where they looked at 6 different mucosal membranes over time. And they looked at the biochemistry of those membranes over the same course of time. And what you get is variation in the bugs that are there. That changes every day. You know, that's not surprising. but the biochemistry stays the same. How they function does not change. That's homeostasis. That's what we're shooting for, is a homeostatic condition. And it's naive to think that that homeostatic condition of a broiler in Canada or a broiler in the US or the broiler in China or Brazil is identical. So we don't necessarily have to know exactly what's going on, because the environment's going to control that homeostasis for those birds. But the homeostasis is based on metabolism. What metabolites are being produced so that those birds can function to their genetic potential, not the bugs themselves, not the individual bugs. Giving a lactobacillus is great if you give it at the right time, but giving it 7 weeks every day, if you believe that's the case, then you don't believe colonization resistance is an actual thing. So yes, metabolites are the way to go. The function of the bug's the way to go, not individual bugs.
Yeah, it's amazing that even the nature and the microbiome also can teach us as a society, right? Because they are there, and they have like a symbiosis in between them, and this symbiosis doesn't mean exactly be always good for each other, but to be in a symbiosis is try to survive in the way they can in that conditions.
Right.
And then, for example, if one of them are not present for some reason, the other one start to take the function because all the community need that functions to stay. So
right.
This is
the microbiota has an incredible amount of redundancy. If we actually take even a partial population and look what a bug does or a series of bugs do, the functions are almost identical. So that if there's something happens that one type of bug actually goes down for whatever reason, then there's other bugs to back it up to help keep that population functioning the way it's supposed to. General biology will tell you that biologically there is a redundancy, and the redundancy is to keep things as close to homeostasis as possible. When it's not, we got disease, serious disease. And we do a damn good job in animal agriculture because how many birds a year are we producing? How many pigs a year? So homeostasis is pretty steady, but it's that 3 to 5% that we lose in poultry. That'd be nice. We can gain back that 1 or 2%. Simply by keeping that homeostatic condition level. Get rid of disease by maintaining homeostasis. So yeah, there's money to be made.
So the beautiful in this that I saw is that when you think about the perfect world today, maybe you need to readjust to what we have done up to now, because we are having like growth promoters, antibiotics, and this situation. One thing that always make me sad, and I always remember that when I used to visit companies very often, and I went to field and people call me because they have some gut problems, and I went there and they do my necropsy and all my system that people said. But and then I talk about what is going on, what happens with these birds, and I enter in the farm, in the house of the animals, and they have a lot of high density in there, like a lot of density, because they want as much as they can in terms of animals to feed the world, and I know that. But one thing that make me always sad is that when I ask to visit the slaughterhouse, I saw that however they are very high efficient in the barn with a lot of birds by meter, when they go to the slaughterhouse, they lost many of this meat. That is the final product, really, because of wood breast, because of lesions, because of inflammation process in different parts of the world.
Right.
So if you put all this together, I think that it's a mission for us that working in animal nutrition, in animal productions in general, that we need to think how we can learn from what we really study. So we have now some informations about microbiota. And as you're saying, we know that alteration in microbiota, alterations in metabolism could cause the productions of some metabolites that will affect the quality of the meat and will be waste in the slaughterhouse. So
Right.
as a final message for all these people, what you want to say in a very short summary of these conversations that you have today in terms of what we should think in our quarantine to improve and to be better as a poultry professional, to really make the difference in terms of to be efficient and sustainable?
Elizabeth, I think the word you used just a couple minutes ago was probably the best word, and that is readjustment. We have to adjust of how the birds are growing now. How has the genetics changed? We know that. So we have to keep that in mind. We have to know about our nutrients. We know how we grow the plant products to feed the animals. We know the adjustment. We've made the adjustment on antibiotic free. So we have to continually realize that we're readjusting to grow these animals. That does not mean that we maintain the way we grew an animal 30 years ago simply because it's more convenient. I'm going to piss off nutritionists right now, but nutritionists have to adjust as well. Those of us that are disease specialists, we adjust. Geneticists adjust. Damn it, nutritionists adjust. That is the way we're going to move forward, is adjusting to the biology of the animal.
Oh my God! So nutritionists have more to do now because Dr. Kogut just give us some tips. But well, Mike, I think that as by the end, what we saw is that we should be aware that maybe all this loss that we are having in slaughterhouse by myopathias could be related to gut health. Yes. To nutrition, and then we should, of course, that we know that genetic plays a very important role in that. This is right. It's already proven, but we should really thinking about how can we manipulate this microbiota. This is a big work to do, right? Because right now we don't have like a really a standard tool to understand how to do it, right?
No, we don't. But we are learning and we're getting there. We're getting to a point that we have a better handle. And I think again, we're readjusting. 5 years ago, everyone, including me, was looking at identifying the microbes and saying, okay, what can we do as a probiotic? Then there was a more shift to the prebiotic, which I still think is a very good thing, using diet to manipulate. But I think as we move forward, understanding what the bugs produce is going to be the way to go, so that we can, if we can't purify what's there to give the feed as a postbiotic, for example, I just don't see we're ever going to give enough bugs themselves. We have to change and manipulate the population that's already there to the advantage of the bird.
Very good. I think that for now, we just need to stay away, stay safe at home. And thank you for your time. Thank you for all these good discussions. The idea here is not we discover the solutions for the world, but show how is the way to go. And I think like manipulate precision nutrition, the right use. Maybe later on we can come here with discussions about enzyme additive. But today the idea is just to put in the table what we can do. So
Elizabeth, I think the biggest thing that as we go forward as scientists is that we're going to have to think that we can't do things individually. We have to form teams. Those teams have specialists within them, so that we work together instead of against each other to be able to solve problems such as this. Because the gut is not necessarily the sole reason why we have woody breast. It is a component. You've already mentioned genetics. If we can attack each of these components with a team, we're going to be able to solve problems.
I think this is very good. The idea is really like that, to split out. There is no really a specialist alone, right? Because all things are connected, all metabolism are connected. So could not be a specialist in something, but you are not. You can be a specialist, but you cannot solve everything by yourself, because you need another information to keep this going. So this is a very nice, I think this is the idea. Our idea is always to have a teamwork, and I would I'd like also to invite, thank you, Mike, and I'd like to invite you and the guys that stay with us today, that next week we stay here with a nutritionist, because we have right now this piece off in the nutritionist. I will give, of course, the open door for a nutritionist come here and say what we are really doing in terms of what we can improve in this side as well. So every week we'll come with some small talk like that. You can send questions to us. You can send the content that you want us to do. And I want to thank you for your attention today. Thank you, Mike. And I see you guys next week. Thank you so much.